So welcome. This is a funding information session for the BU Medical Campus and Hariri Institute Digital Health Focused Research Program. So these FRPs, that's how we call them, are a signature funding mechanism of the Institute, of the Hariri Institute. But this one is special because it's focusing on digital health and is done with partnership with the Boston University Medical Campus. The purpose is actually to bring together many of you that are researchers here at the medical campus and also researchers on the Charles River campus who are working on digital health or are interested in that topic, and inform all of you, the BU community, about the different resources that we have in place to be able to enable and support that work. And also part of the objective is to revitalize after the pandemic and accelerate the BUMC and CRC collaborative efforts in AI, data science, and more broadly, computational science and engineering. So before we start, just a few things about logistics. We're delighted to have 7 speakers today that will give you, from their perspective, an overview about the work that they are doing, and they will also point out opportunities in digital health and resources that would enable that work. So these are going to be relatively short talks, about 7 minutes or so, and we ask the speakers to stay to that. We will not be very stringent, but please stay within that limit. And because these are very short talks, if there are any questions, we will take maybe 1 or 2 burning questions at the end of each talk, but keep most of the questions and perhaps the more open-ended ones at the end, for the end of the meeting. The event is being recorded and will be made available online through the Hariri Institute YouTube channel. And there are handouts on the tables that you have in front of you informing you about the program, and there are links to a webpage where you can find more information on how to apply and how to participate. And before we start, I would like to thank a few organizations and a few individuals that have made this possible, including the Boston University School of Public Health that is providing funds for this FRP. The CTSI, the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, is also providing funds for this initiative. And I would like to thank some individuals that have been a sounding board in organizing this: Mike McLean, David Center, Andy Taylor, Katya Ravid. Also, I would like to thank the people that have made it possible: Robin McDonald, Ken Rudolph, and Catherine D'Angelo. If during the event, during the presentation, you have any questions, raise your hand. We will have microphones that are going around so that you can be heard during the recording. And I would also like to thank all of the speakers that I will introduce them one by one. What we will start with is a brief introduction about the Institute. So this is today's agenda. The Institute is an incubator and a convergence accelerator at Boston University. And we are looking to initiate research convergence and accelerate that research. We are looking for research that has social impact at the nexus of computational and data science is, again, very broadly defined. Within the Institute, we have a number of research centers and initiatives. We have the signature funding mechanism, the focused research programs. We have a number of external partnerships that I will talk a little bit more about. And we also have an in-house professional software and application development lab that, again, you will hear from them about their capabilities and the way you can connect with them and engage with them as part of your research. We also have space for collaborative efforts, and for people that are involved in this FRP, we can make to them space available to collaborate. And we also have fantastic staff that are handling many of the things that we as faculty members don't necessarily want to handle on a daily basis, like grant management, grant submission. Currently at the Institute, we have about $20 million in annual research expenditures from a variety of sponsored programs. And we can also organize seminars, events like this one, and handle scientific professional communications. So in terms of core areas of strength, I would mention three in particular: cloud computing, cybersecurity and privacy, and artificial intelligence. And we are adding to these capabilities with new faculty and that are being associated with the Institute. We have a new home. We just moved in. Well, it's a bit more complicated story because our boxes have moved in, but we have not been able to get into the building. So we are hoping that this week we'll get into this new building. So this is the Jigsaw building that you may see as you drive from Storo Drive. And we are very excited, and it's going to be an interesting building from a variety of perspectives. So you are very welcome to come and visit us there as soon as we are in. So the Institute is more of a federation. So we have a number of centers and initiatives under the Institute. So here's a list. They range from the very traditional academic research centers, including the Center for Computational Science, the Center for Information and Systems Engineering, Center for Reliable Information Systems and Cybersecurity. We have a new AI research initiative, an AI and education initiative. We are the home of the largest industry partnership of Boston University. That's the Red Hat Collaboratory. And we're also the home of what we call the MOC Alliance. So that's the Massachusetts Open Cloud Alliance. This is an alliance between Harvard University and BU, and we will be hopefully soon welcoming other partners as part of this alliance. And part of the goal is to offer cloud services that are specifically designed for research projects that offer the type of cloud services that, for instance, companies may go and buy on the public cloud from the Amazons and the Microsofts of the world. We also, within the Institute, I mentioned the SAIL, the Software and Application Innovation Lab, and we also have the Boston Women's Workforce Council, which is a partnership between the City of Boston, Boston University, and private companies, and their goal is to understand and quantify gender pay gap in industry. So what we do is obviously going to be a snapshot of some of the projects that are ongoing. We are bringing together robotics and neuroscience to usher the next generation of autonomous systems. We're bringing software engineering into criminal justice reform, understanding misinformation in an era of COVID-19, bringing computing and visualization science in order to understand climate change. And if we look at some of the projects that are perhaps more digitally health oriented, so again, a snapshot of a variety of projects, which gives you a sense of the capabilities and the expertise of the faculty that are associated with the Institute. So we are part of a dream team of research centers at BU that have been awarded an 18-month NSF phase 1 grant to look into predicting and preventing the next pandemic. We also are collaborating with the Framingham Heart Study using AI models to detect cognitive impairment. We have worked with BUMC faculty to develop a predictive model for COVID-19, predicting hospitalizations, disease severity. One of our junior faculty fellows, who is at the School of Public Health, Sharif Mohammed, has developed a statistical model that finds connections between imaging and genomic measures. One other of our junior faculty fellows, Jonathan J., has developed an AI algorithm that is looking into city spaces and tries to prioritize those that should be targeted for interventions in order to reduce gun violence. have also worked with the School of Public Health, Lauren Wise and Elizabeth Hatch, to develop predictive models of pregnancy using one of their signature studies, the Presto preconception study. So the focused research programs are a signature funding mechanism, as I said, of the Institute. And the mission is to advance BU research in areas that are computational, data-driven science and engineering, again, very broadly defined, in areas that we think are of strategic importance and also we think are an emerging opportunity. And the goal is really to bring teams together, and these are medium to large size teams, and give them enough resources for about a year to go and coalesce around a specific topic, be able to generate enough preliminary results so that they can be competitive and they can go out and have impact, but also bring larger grants into Boston University. And the way the FRPs work, we fund these teams. What we expect, we fund them for a year. What we expect is one or two, perhaps, leaders of the FRP that form the team, and they coalesce a team around a specific research theme. There are a number of sub-themes under the main theme of the FRP, and these sub-themes usually are headed by additional faculty, and then always graduate students are involved in the research. And we have a mechanism in place to support the FRPs once we award it, so that to make sure that they have as much impact as they can possibly have. So for this specific digital health FRP, we have partnered with the School of Public Health and CTSI, and on the website, and you can take a picture if you would like of this slide. So there is a QR code that will take you to the website, and also this URL that you see here will take you to the website. We are asking for a very minor pre-proposal, just replying to a few questions in February so that we are understanding what you are thinking. And we're asking for, again, a proposal in the March 2023 timeframe. And again, this is not going to be an onerous proposal of the type that you write to NSF or to NIH. It's going to be much less effort. And we are expecting participation from the School of Public Health, the School of Medicine, and the Charles River campus, a variety of departments on the Charles River. We are expecting that the teams that will propose for this DHI FRP will have translational inspirations, so going beyond just publishing papers. And for this particular FRP, usually we don't do that, but we will allow salary for faculty that are on the medical campus because of the way typically these faculty are funded. We think that's important for them to be able to devote time and participate in the research. Just very briefly, this is a listing of some of the FRPs that we are currently supporting, just to give you a sense of the range of topics that we are supporting under the FRP mechanism. And with that, and so that we can move faster, the next item in the agenda is I will ask Will Tomlinson, who is the director of our Software and Application Innovation Lab, just to spend a few minutes to talk to you about the lab and the capabilities that they have and how you can engage with them. Will.
Thank you, Yannis. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. First time on the Boston University's medical campus. I just joined BU back in January. I'm happy to be on the Hariri team and leading the director of SAIL. So I'll get right into it. SAIL essentially exists to be a professional software development resource for staff and faculty and your research areas here at Boston University. We work to instantiate the research or either drive along the progress of research with an emphasis on full stack development for web apps and mobile applications. We worked with, it says over 60 plus faculty members, over 70 plus faculty, and over 20 departments here at BU. And so we really charge with helping all of researchers across the entire university and not just a specific niche area or domain. And this year alone, we've collaborated in proposals with faculty that totaled over $30 million in value. So whatever your research interests are, those are SAIL research interests. And our goal here is to help further propagate that synergy that is popping up in research between software development and other forms of research. A few of we have projects structured in various different areas across the university, but we bracket these projects into various program areas. And so those are listed for your viewing leisure there. With today's focus on digital health, we can look at that as a point of emphasis there, but essentially cell engineers are trained to work with HIPAA compliant data sets. A lot of our digital health related projects have been in mobile app domains. Some collaborators sit in this very room today. I'm looking at one in the corner now. And we've done research data repositories, research portals for onboarding researchers and various roles in terms of clinician views, admin views, different educator views. We really have a plethora of offerings within SAIL, and some are outlined here at the bottom as well. Naturally, the full stack software development is listed there, but part of my capacity here is to assist in proposal and grant writing. So if there are needs within your grants or proposals that require a software engineering component written, we either budget it out within that and within the line item of the budget, that's where I'm able to assist in. But we also have staff on board who have project and product management skill sets to help guide along the workflow of the actual research that we're actually helping to assist with. Code-based refactoring, that's there because you have PIs like yourself and other faculty across BU who have postdocs and grad students and undergrads who are maybe developing software, but as they move on to their other parts of their career, that code base or that software element is sitting there. You need it productionalized or maintained. SAIL has a value added there as well. And even just general overall industry leading software development best practices consulting is another area that we provide here for researchers. I keep moving along just to be brief here. So here's a list of example SAIL projects that we have worked on that are kind of cross collaborate here with some faculty here in the medical campus, but overall have a digital health kind of flavor. So I have ASLX written in the corner. That is essentially is the world's largest database for interactive American Sign Language tagging and viewing connections of how sign language connects to other parts of that whole phonetic structure. That is also in the form of a data science project too, has a complex visualization there as well. Noise Score and Able are two mobile apps in the digital health domain. So both sort of leveraging a human element. One, Noise Score measures environmental noise and studies how that impacts mental health. Able, who we collaborate with Belinda Borelli, who's in the room here. She can talk more about that, but it's a smoking cessation app geared to interact with patients to enhance their well-being and to get them to quit smoking. Damp Lab, which is previously, I think, the COVID testing laboratory. We essentially are now working with them to develop their software to interact with their microbiology automation robotics that they have there. And NPC Med is just a way, a form of some secure data computation that we have within SAIL that leverages a technology called multi-party computation. We've used that actually in our efforts with the Boston Women's Workforce Council that Yannis mentioned to help. Essentially, it's a system that allows you to securely share, collect, and aggregate data and perform calculations on that data without revealing the owner of that data. For the use case of Boston Women's Workforce Council, they're collecting salary and compensation data across all ethnic groups for those organizations. So you can imagine if Google or Verizon is submitting their salary information, they don't want you to know that it's actually coming from Google itself, but we can collect that data, aggregate it, and process that data for certain results without revealing who the owners are. So just a few examples. I know this is a lot of quick hit information, but essentially we exist here, SAIL exists here at BU to service your research needs. So whether those funds come from a Hariri related event or funding opportunity from your own grants or research budgets or startup funds, however it may be, SAIL is designed to work with you, whatever those needs are, and you can interact with us simply by, it's pretty simple, getting in touch with myself or going to the SAIL website or the Hariri website. There's various ways to click on contact links and figure out how to find us. You can talk to me after this. We essentially work with you to draft a project plan based on your research needs and objectives and how software engineering ties with that. Once that project plan is approved, start the work. SAIL is a direct line item cost on whatever budget you have in mind, and we charge an engineering hourly rate for the services, for software development services to BU. And then 4 is simply iterate over that software and deliver the product to our researchers based on their needs. And I do see a question back here. Maintenance for service level agreements? By service level agreement, you're referring to?
Well, let's say
Sure. Exactly. Yep, no, that's exactly it. We also existed to that as well. So that's a good point. So any pre-existing, I touched on that a little bit with the student developed code base, but if it's already in the production level quality, we also work with that as well. That wraps up my discussion here for sale and an overview. I can take probably one more question, maybe. You said 1 or 2, so one more question, if any. If not, I'll be around afterwards for socializing and whatnot, but appreciate you all giving me the time here today, and I'll pass it back over to Yannis.
Right. Thank you. Okay, and this is where you can find us, and we'll move along with the program. So I'll ask Bill Adams to come and present. So Bill is a professor of pediatrics, and he's also heading the CTSI medical informatics work, and we have collaborated for many years with Bill, and he was my the door that opened medical data, at least for me. So looking forward.
And hopefully for all of you too. So I'm here as a bit of an evangelist to show you some of the stuff that's available here at BU and excite you about some possibilities, and hopefully you can fold in some of these ideas into your focused research proposals. So I start all my talks with a photo of Boston, because what we're really talking about is place-based or population-based research for health. We are Boston Medical Center, a very large safety net hospital, but we're also closely affiliated with a number of community health centers in Boston. So our ability to pool data and to actually understand health in terms of the data that's in the health system, but also the data that's in the places where people live, the air they breathe, the life experience, and many other things are critical if we're going to advance the study and research around health equity, which is what we're most passionate about on our side. The system we've built within the CTSI over the last 12 or 14 years or so is represented here. There's an awful lot on this slide, but at the very center of it all is a clinical data warehouse at Boston Medical Center that we partner with to use and leverage that data. We, within the CTSI, but also within BMC, provide a lot of expert consultation and direct access to the underlying data. That's not going to be my focus for today, but it's certainly available, and I'll touch on it briefly. But there are a number of folks to help researchers at all levels navigate the data and the tools that are available to folks. A lot of our work now is focusing on advancing common data models, especially OMOP. The OMOP common data model is an international standard now and represents data in a way that can be explored locally, but also be integral to national and international collaborations. And I'll talk a little bit about how we use that common data model data to collaborate with a variety of networks across the country. Our local project that I won't have a lot of time to talk about is the Data for Equity project, where we're bringing together clinical data with place-based data and social determinants data to provide rich foundational data in the OMOP common data model. And then I'll talk a little bit about Trinetics, which is a for-profit cloud-based computing company that collaborates around clinical trials and also data science that I'll hope we can take advantage of a lot more next year. I'll touch base a little bit on the All of Us research project too, that's available to any BU or BMC researcher. And finally, I'll mention a little bit about N3C. So first of all, everyone should know about the clinical data warehouse here at BMC. The URL is at the bottom. There's 3 analysts available to help folks on an hourly basis to extract and use data with IRB approval. They're a remarkably talented group and also have a scientific advisor, Heather Sue, who can help folks think about their work. So I strongly encourage, and probably most users with modest data needs would start in this place. And BMC is especially feel strongly that data scientists from the Charles River campus should seek to collaborate with clinician researchers over here as well. So it's a partnership. And so we at the CTSI would love to help make connections for folks with certain interests. The Health Equity Accelerator is a newly launched initiative about a year ago at BMC, which is really looking to advance health equity across the entire institution from in all aspects actually, but research and education are a big part of that, and a strong focus on community and social determinants of health. So the platform that we're building in collaboration with the accelerator is the Data for Equity platform, which again uses the OMOP common data model. It's going to provide 20 years of longitudinal data, clinical data from community health centers and BMC. Tightly integrated, that will be rich place-based data, as well as new national mortality data, not just limited to the hospital mortality outcomes, but actually national data sets. So we can start looking at life expectancy. We use the common data model. There's great shared tools, the opportunity to build new tools and share them nationally, internationally. The odyssey.org community is the community that supports OMOP. So if you go to odyssey.org, you can learn a lot more about this platform, but it's a wonderful community and lots and lots of rich opportunities there. And the way I think of it is we really need to advance health services research, HSR, comparative effectiveness research, machine learning and AI, and even quality improvement. So these platforms can really have any of those foci. And we now have a full-time analyst who can help folks understand and navigate the OMOP common data model. And we are building a really cool tool for the accelerator called the Health Equity Explorer, which pre-computes a whole portfolio of health outcomes and allows users in a sort of drag and drop way to explore health equity, accounting for right now 20 different predictor variables, but both the outcome library and the predictor variable library will grow over time and really is only limited by the data that we have in the system. Trinetics, we could spend a whole long time on this too. We share this OMOP data with this company called Trinetics. In exchange for that, they offer us opportunities to collaborate with pharmaceutical companies to do clinical trials, but they also provide a really rich cloud-based computing environment. And without spending too much time on this, there's two ways that users can use the Trinetics platform. One is a self-service interactive tool to look at BMC and national data in an aggregate form. But in February, we're actually going to have access to the Lucid cloud computing platform, which is a fully anonymized integrated data set for, I think, 50 different health systems all across the country now. It has a very scalable architecture. It uses Python and R and SQL and Jupyter Notebooks, so teams can collaborate and in pretty short order have access to 200 or 300 million patients and all of their clinical data for advanced analytic techniques. And we would be really encouraged to join them, and they are very excited about having BMC and BU participate in the platform. And then in the 1 minute remaining, I'll remind everyone that we are active participants in the N3C collaborative, which is a national collaboration where we share our OMOP data with NIH. And this also uses the OMOP common data model and has now data for 6.4 million COVID patients and a whole portfolio of supplemental data from the federal government. And then we also are very active in the All of Us project, which is a consented process where individuals contribute their electronic health data across the country, in addition to filling out questionnaires and providing much more patient-centered data that's richer. And that data is also in the OMOP common data model. So any researcher within our community would be welcome to collaborate as well within the All of Us program. So really, what I've been saying lately within the CTSI is we have more data than scientists, and we have phenomenal resources and rich opportunities. And so what we're really looking for our partners to help us use these data. Here's a little bit of a quick guide to how to get some help along the way. Nick will help you by email. I'm happy to meet with folks for consultation. The CDW link is there as well. And then if you want to put in a consult to the CTSI, there's links there as well. And I actually finished on time. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. If there is any question for Bill while we'll transition, we'll take it.
Does that include all the community health centers?
It's the EPIC using community health.
Okay,
centers.
that was my question. Yeah.
And actually coaching EPIC. So it does not include East Boston, for example, but it's 8 community health centers, and it's the health centers that are in closest proximity to BMC. So really good coverage of growth factors, alpha, and
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Next up, Chao Zhang. He's a professor of computational biomedicine at the School of Medicine. He recently joined BU and he's going to talk about to us about his activities and also the activities of the group that the data science core that they are building at the medical school.
Yeah, I'm glad to have this opportunity to share some of my experience to apply the data science technique to the cancer research, and also briefly talking about the newly established data science core. And the last decade, I could say it's a decade for the cancer research, and for those big consortium projects such as the TCGA and CGC, they collect a lot of patient samples. For the TCGA, it accumulates like more than 11,000 patient samples from 33 different cancer types. And also they generate 7 different types of molecular data. And with those data, researchers and physician scientists, they can better understand the molecular basis of each cancer type, and also can redefine the cancer subtype by using the molecular markers and further to discover the potentially actionable drug treatment target. And besides those, and also provide relatively large scale data for the computational biologists for the further future research. And so we can using the machine learning based or statistical based method to integrate the multiple layers data and all like to perform the study across different cancer types to understand the cancer evolution and find the commonality across different cancer types. Also could derive the new markers to help the diagnosis within those 7 different molecular data type. And using the methylation data, analysis DNA methylation data from the patient sample is always a big challenge. And we successfully to develop a new novel method to conquer this particular challenge, because there is we know the DNA methylation, there is a huge personal background and a huge heterogeneity across different individuals. By comparing the tumor cells DNA methylation pattern and the normal cells, so we can successfully remove the personal background. And by integrating the DNA methylation data and the mutation data, we can successfully filter out those passenger DNA methylation changes and finally identify the driver DNA methylation. And with those new epigenetic driver, we can help to better diagnosis the cancer and also redefine the new cancer type with those DNA methylation information. And last 10 decades also not only the decade for the cancer research, also the decade for the microbiome research. And with those large projects, people better understand the interaction between hosts and the different microbiome and host diseases. And they also found the microbiome not only can cause disease, also can affect the drug treatment, especially the immunotherapy treatment outcome. But unfortunately for those TCGA data, when they designed the project, they didn't collect those information with like specific assay. And we can use the computational method to identify the microbiome from the general sequencing data. And with those identified intra-tumor microbiome and the molecular other layers of molecular data, we successfully identify 2 mutually exclusive interactions between intra-tumor microbiome and the tumor cell. Either the intra-tumor microbiome can affect the immune response or alter the DNA methylation of oncogenes or the tumor suppressors. And we also identify some specific link between specific microbiome and specific cell type or markers applied to the clinical data, clinical samples. And with the clinical trials information, and also we applied those methods and the discovery to the immunotherapy patient samples and the chemotherapy patient samples, and to better to discover some normal biomarkers to better predict the treatment outcome and help improve the prognosis. And the deep learning is a hot topic in the past several years, but we barely see any successfully applications using the fancy deep learning algorithm in the cancer research or molecular biology research, because even for those relatively large scale of the project TCG, ICG, the sample size is still very limited for the deep learning model. And with the large scale, high dimensional data, such as the single cell data, the CRISPR screening, drug perturbation, with even more larger scale real world cancer project, we could apply the deep learning method to further to integrate those data and to predict the drug target, and also to discover the drug combination or the drug repurpose for the patient with patient data. But those are all molecular levels data, and we cannot ignore the imaging data and the EHR, MRI data. If we can successfully apply the deep learning model to integrate all those data, then we can truly build a digital diagnosis platform to achieve the real personalized treatment method, or discover the personalized the medicine. And this is also the whole platform can apply to other diseases or other research field, but it cannot be achieved by any one single person or single team. It requires a lot of different aspects or different expertise, need a teamwork. So now we talk about team. We have a newly launched the data science core, and we currently have 3 faculties with different expertise, and we launched late this March until now, like almost 8 months. We got a lot of requests, probably like more than 25 requests from different groups, and my personally submit 15 grant application and with other groups, and we have limited capacity. We saw like besides helping other groups to analyze data, we should become a bridge, and because we can speak both computational language and the biological language, maybe we can become the bridge to help to boost the collaborations across the campus, across the institute. So I'd like to take any questions about the data science core and my research.
Thank you, Chao. Any question? All right, so next is Belinda Borelli. She's a professor at the School of Dental Medicine, and she's also the leader of one of the ARCs. Belinda.
Great, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. Today I'll be talking a bit about motivating health behavior change through digital technology and some examples from the Mobile Electronic Health ARC, or MEARC, which I'm director and PI. And I just wanted to thank the Evans Center and the IBRO for funding us, and Katja Ravid and Dave Coleman, and it's certainly Robert McDonald for helping us throughout all these years. Mission of the MEARC is to, is it up there? No. Okay. The mission of the MEARC is to conduct research and training in digital health to improve health across the lifespan, with a particular emphasis on vulnerable and underserved populations. And the leadership team includes Lisa Quintiliani, Swati Karan, and Rebecca Mashuris. So when I founded the MEARC in 2016, there weren't many people at BU who were doing digital health. And those who were doing digital health needed support just about like digital health mechanics, industry collaborations, how to integrate behavioral principles and increase engagement into apps. And so the ME ARC became an interdisciplinary cross-campus group who shared their knowledge on these factors. And we collaborated on publications, presentations, and grant submissions. And we do monthly seminars, a yearly symposium. And last year's symposium, we actually collaborated with the FRP and created a joint symposium. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how the ME ARC impacted 3 different areas: digital health inequities, creating agile and adaptive interventions, and using data science and computational methods to improve precision in our interventions. And third, integrating interventions into existing infrastructures. So in terms of digital health and inequity interventions, you can see here are 4 projects. Each row is a different project, and they all impact different vulnerable populations, different behaviors to change, and using different digital platforms and settings, and led by different investigators too. So while all of our projects, these and some others, focus on vulnerable and underserved populations, I'm highlighting these 4. And what they all have in common is that they use iterative development to develop digital solutions. So it's involving the target population every step of the way, from concept to development to design to user testing, and even beyond that. So this is really critical for user engagement, because you can build the best digital solution, but if nobody uses it, it's useless, right? So it's also, the literature has shown that it increases the likelihood of efficacy of these interventions when you're involving the target population at all stages. So, one example is my project with Michelle Henshaw and Bill Adams, in which we're trying to improve pediatric oral health using parent-targeted interactive and gamified text messaging. And what we showed very high engagement rates and also a significant impact on a constellation of pediatric oral health behaviors. So, and I think this is largely because we involve not only the patient population every step of the way, but also provider stakeholders. And so both helped us write the text messages, advised us on how we gamify the program, how we increase interactivity, among other things. The other commonality between these projects is that you're using a single digital solution to affect multiple health behaviors. So another example is Deepak Kumar's project, and he's focused on improving physical activity by also targeting sleep and depressed mood, which are 2 risk factors for decreased physical activity in older adults. The next set of projects focus on creating agile and adaptive interventions by using computational and algorithmic methods to really optimize digital interventions. And this involves building very personalized interventions that adapt over time to the individual's dynamic fluctuations of how they're feeling or what they're doing or the actual context that they're in. And as you can imagine, this really increases engagement as well. It also allows for optimization of the actual features that are presented to the user, right? So things that are increasing engagement and increasing efficacy get shown to the user more often. So you have this level of optimization, and certain deployment of behavior change techniques or non-deployment of this behavior change techniques are also optimized depending on the user. And the data that are used for optimization are generally gleaned from sensors and from self-report. So one example is a study that I'm conducting with teens trying to prevent or help them stop vaping. And we're using immersive virtual reality in school. So integrating it into the school curriculum to help them stop vaping. And it's a responsive set of games and experience to what the user is doing and the decision they're making. And these decisions are across multiple platforms, not only the VR headset, but also a mobile app that's that's paired with it, and that will affect the trajectory of the story and the games within the VR experience. So many of these MEARC projects involve not only delivering interventions in the real world, but also integrating the intervention into the fabric of existing infrastructures. And so these two projects are focused on integrating into medical settings, which, as you know, also reduce provider burden, and especially when there are comorbidities. So Hasmina Gathoria's project out of BUMC focuses on adult smokers who are also opiate users. So one intervention attacking these comorbidities, and she's also incorporating a lot of social determinants of health into her intervention. And then there's another study by myself that focuses on dental patients who are getting their teeth cleaned, and they're smokers. And so many of them normally wouldn't seek treatment for smoking cessation, but they're in the dentist's office. And so we put on a virtual reality headset and deliver a very tailored intervention while they're getting their teeth cleaned. So you can use these infrastructures to really reach people, and this is where my heart is, really reach people who are vulnerable, underserved, and not motivated to change, because it has reduced burden on them because they're already getting their teeth clean in this situation. And in that intervention, it's calibrated to the person's motivation to quit. So people have a different experience if they're motivated to quit versus not motivated to quit. So both of these studies involved a very careful workflow study of the workflow and the environment to be able to integrate it into that. So my last slide is our current effort in the MEARC, which is to leverage all of our collective experience and develop these guidelines for researchers and developers to follow when creating and testing digital technologies to ensure equity for all users. I invite collaborators to this effort, so please contact me if you want to be part of the team. And I also want to shout out to Chao, who has helped us develop 2.5 mobile apps, and it's been a great experience working with Will and his team. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Belinda. A question, Bill?
I know the mobile health team just finished at FRP, was it last year? I know the mobile health group finished a focused research program initiative, I think last year. And I was just curious, what were the benefits? What did you take away, or how would you advise folks who are trying to put together an RFP on how to our FRP, sorry, to make the best use of it?
Well, I can certainly speak to, the MEARC and our experience in trying to increase collaboration and goals. The MEARC was part of the FRP, but I didn't lead that up, and that's led by Lisa Quintiliani and I can't remember her last name, but yeah, that's our next step, is to, work with them more closely to join forces on a pre-arc that involves more cloud computing and AI, and trying to build that into our digital interventions. But I think, one big piece of advice about this whole thing is to really focus on something that people are already doing. Because if somebody has to do something extra that's a little outside their wheelhouse, they're not going to do it. So yeah, finding that niche that they're going to do anyway.
Well, we will have some time at the end to discuss strategies for the FRP and what the objective may be. So thank you, Bill, Belinda. So now our next speaker is Kehan Batmangelic, who is currently an assistant professor at the medical school at the University of Pittsburgh, but not for long, because in January he will join the electrical and computer engineering on the Charles River campus here at BU. Kehan.
Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Kehan Batmangelic. I'm an incoming assistant professor in electrical engineering department. As Yannis mentioned, I'm currently faculty in medical school. So Machine learning and AI has found application almost everywhere throughout this spectrum, that one end of it is clinical decision support and the other end of that is medical research, where we are interested in underlying causes of disease. Over the past 6 years, our lab has been contributed to many aspects of throughout this spectrum. We have focused on multiple problems on chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, Alzheimer's disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and also we have contributed some project on the other end of the spectrum about clinical decision support. So today, I'm going to focus on two ends of the spectrum to give an examples. And of course, given that I'm starting in January, I'm looking forward to expand and collaborate across the campus. And given that my background, I would love to expand toward BUMC and work with other colleagues toward there. So let's get started. So one of the projects we've been working on is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, one of the leading causes of the death in US and worldwide. The symptoms include shortness of the breath, cough, and sputum, but there are also very important genetic factors and also environmental factors. The way that COPD is diagnosed is through a spirometry test that the patient is asked to inhale and exhale forcefully through a spirometer, and the spirometer measures amount and speed of the air that is exhaled. There are multiple processes involved in COPD. The two main one is airway disease and destruction of the airways, which is COPD. However, this disease is very heterogeneous and the progression of that is not well understood. So this is why increasingly CT scan of the lung and other modalities, genetic and genomic information are involved in order to understand this disease better. So one of the project that we have been involved on, and one of the main funding of the lab, was how to provide an AI method that integrates information from multiple sources, imaging, genetic, and genomic data in order to understand the progression of the disease and subtype the disease better. So the general idea is that multiple information, like one from imaging that measures the anatomy, genetic and genomic that measures the progression and the underlying processes, can each contribute different information, and we can piece them together with the AI system so that we can understand the underlying etiology of disease better. So I won't go through the detail, but I'll give you the gist of the idea. So for example, we have developed a method that consume imaging from the CT scan of the lung and transcriptomics and define new axes for progression of the disease, because we believe that spirometry is not telling us the whole story, is only aggregate information. So here is an example of what we can derive by combining imaging and transcriptomics. Here, each dot represents one patient, and these two axes are two axes of the progression of the disease, and color represent this spirometry test. Like an example of that is FEV1, forced expiratory volume in 1 second. And the darker the color, the more severe the patient. So I'm going to give you 3 exemplar patients that are all doing pretty bad in a spirometry test. The patient on the bottom left has doing pretty bad in the test, but has a lot of emphysema patient. I don't know, in this color you can see that there are a lot of red areas in the lung of the patient. The patient on the top is doing pretty bad in spirometry test, but there aren't that much of emphysema. And the patient on the corner is something in between. So when we actually look into phenotype of this individual, this is what pulmonologists call pink, so what's called the blue blower and pink puffer. So this is what is basically defined based on a phenotypic observation of the disease. So the patients who are called pink puffers tend to be lower BMI and also have a severe shortness of the breath, while the patients that are usually typically called as a pink puffer are the one that has a lot of wheezing and tend to be more obese. But these are phenotypically defined. They are not really well understood what are the underlying processes. By combining this information, we can shed light on underlying process and say that what changes in anatomy, what are the underlying processes that is given to us through transcriptomics, and we can define this progression in a data-driven way by piecing information from multiple sources. And as a result, we can define multiple action for and multiple drug to stop the progression of the disease. So let me give you another example on the other end of the spectrum. This time, this project is on the clinical decision support end of the spectrum. So there's a surgical procedure called carotid endotractectomy where they have to open the artery to clean it up, and as a result, they have to clamp it. So during this process, when they clamp the artery, the blood comes from the other artery, which is smaller, from the back of the neck. But in some patients, because their brain is more sensitive or some other factors, this process does not happen, that result in ischemia, and ischemia can result in stroke. Unfortunately, very small percentage of the stroke are detected during the surgery, and unfortunately, most of these stroke are detected after the surgery, which means that we lose a lot of important time that we can actually intervene, and the brain dead dies. So the image that you see on the top is my neurophysiologist collaborator that looks at the EEG signal during the surgery to ask the surgeon to stop the process and then put a shunt. But this is very tedious task. It's not accessible everywhere. It's not even accessible in all kinds of surgery. So we are developing an algorithm that basically tries to provide assistive tools to the surgeon during the surgery by analyzing EEG signal. And this is an example of using AI for clinical decision support. So these are just two ends of the spectrum of AI in healthcare domain. There are multiple other projects that our lab has been involved, and I would love to collaborate with you and your colleagues in BUMC in similar projects and similar dimension. Thank you.
Thank you, Kehan. Any questions?
Implemented any AI algorithms in Epic?
No, but this is the project that because it's much more complicated step from going from like development of algorithm all of the different. This is the one that are actually getting closer because we have to get FDA approval before they. So we spent 2 years just cleaning up the data and went through one process with the FDA to see like what they even care about, because there is 10% of the work about algorithm development. There's a lot of work should be done about. So I learned a lot through this process. This is what it will be actually involved, and we are in the process of going through it.
Thank you. So next, Laura White, who is a professor of biostatistics at the School of Public Health and an expert in epidemics, infectious diseases.
Great. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak a little bit about some of the work we've been doing in my group. As Yannis said, I'm in the Department of Biostatistics, and as such, I'm more of a consumer of data than a producer of data. Very interested in figuring out ways that we can understand better population health dynamics from existing data sets, particularly that are collected for surveillance or other types of activities. So I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the work we've done, more focused on COVID and thinking about pandemic preparedness. Some of the key questions we have been interested in answering is really understanding disease dynamics, transmission dynamics, particularly early in an emerging outbreak. So I was doing PhD work during the 2003 SARS outbreak, and that motivated a bit of my thesis work and is work since then. And then unfortunately, we've entered another position where this has become prescient again. So a lot of the work I do is interested in saying, well, we have a lot of data lying around. Can we sort of understand from that existing data how fast a disease is spreading, particularly estimates of reproductive numbers and serial intervals, things that give us a little better sense of dynamics and thus inform what type of interventions might be most helpful. Early in the pandemic, so that's sort of a question that's been being tossed around for a long time, how to do that. I think some of the important areas we're trying to move into is to understand important heterogeneities in that. And that I think the disparities issues in this pandemic have been very apparent and front page type of news. But the question is sort of statistically, how do we really rigorously go after those and understand from a very data-driven way where the disparities exist and what might be driving them? Early in the pandemic with the PhD student, we started looking at subway data from New York City, and that's what some of these figures are depicting, and just changes in mobility patterns on the subway. And the spatial patterns are compelling, especially when put with income, clearly showing that people with higher income levels were able to decrease their mobility patterns much more than people in lower income levels. So that's, I think, a story we're all quite familiar with at this point, but brings this question of what does that mean about transmission in places that might be most vulnerable. So that's motivated some further work saying, well, let's look a little bit more at this human mobility piece. There's a lot more data around that looks at cell phone data and understanding people's movement patterns. So this is data from SafeGraph. It's data that's actually collected a lot more for commercial purposes and people trying to understand who might show up at their stores and shopping patterns, but has been repurposed a lot for public health interests. So we were looking at SafeGraph data with the interest of trying to understand where people are spending their time. When a case of COVID is diagnosed, it's typically attached to someone's home address, but as we know, a lot of people are spending time in other places, and some of the highest risks of exposure may actually be in a place completely different from where a person lives. So our interest was in coupling this mobility data with diagnosis data and trying to get a better sense of really pinpointing where transmission might be occurring and risk of transmission. So what we've done is revise statistical approaches to estimate reproductive numbers. And I apologize, this is a hard to read slide, but this is basically showing counties across Massachusetts and revised estimates of reproductive numbers that are incorporating this mobility data in it. And it's a little hard to see here, but really when you start incorporating mobility data and allowing people to inhabit different spaces, our understanding of transmission dynamics change quite a bit, especially in a place like Massachusetts, where we have a lot of people who weekend on the Cape and spend a bit of time there, but that's not actually their residential address. So few cases get attributed to the Cape, even though people are spending a substantial amount of time there. The final thing I want to mention is just in general, a question we're quite interested in that we've addressed in various diseases. We work on this in tuberculosis, in COVID, as I've mentioned, and also in substance use disorders, which is really an interest in data integration. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of interesting sources of data out there. I've talked about mobility data and case count data, and how can we bring those together in a unified estimation framework. But we're interested in doing this in other diseases. So we've done some work in tuberculosis, looking at sequencing data coupled with contact tracing data, and trying to figure out machine learning approaches that we can bring those together to better understand transmission networks. And this figure is just a depiction of a bit of work we've done for this in tuberculosis, of trying to better elucidate what are the factors that are associated with transmission. How can we best learn from sequencing data, which often we want to take at face value, but we know it's not perfect for understanding transmission links. How can we couple that with traditional contact tracing and better understand who's infecting whom, and thus have a better idea of where we target interventions. We're interested in also exploring issues around digital contact tracing. I think that's been an area of a lot of interest, but I think there's some challenges there in figuring out how to best do that. And then also incorporating issues around wastewater, and there's just really no one data set that does everything we want to do, but a lot of data sets that perhaps when pieced together in appropriate statistical frameworks might give us a better signal and understanding of dynamics of diseases. So I will end there and happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Right, great. Thank you so much. So next is Swati Kiran, who is a professor at the Zhang College in neurorehabilitation.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks also for the opportunity to speak here. I head the newly formed Center for Brain Recovery, and the goal of the Center for Brain Recovery is to understand and diagnose and treat individuals with neurological disorders. And this is people who have stroke, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and it's a fairly broad range. There are several aspects to the center, including randomized controlled trials and social advocacy work that we're involved in. But for today's talk, I wanted to talk about 3 research thrusts that are focused on data science and computational data science. And so I want to first acknowledge that this is really collaborative work. I study people who've had a stroke, but I don't know how to do the data science part of it. And for that, there's a fantastic team of engineers, computer scientists at Boston University who are also interested in this question. So I wanted to give you 3 examples of how we're trying to tackle these questions. The first theme is about developing computational models to analyze neural markers of brain health and disease and recovery. And this involves a number of folks, including Professor Margaret Betke, Professor Ishwar, who's here, Professor Vijaya Kolachalama, David Summers, and Mike Esterman, and including Professor Conrad, who's also here. The second theme is to look and try to develop computational models to measure and quantify human communication and cognitive function. So this is different from the previous aim, where we're really focused on brain scans and brain health. This is looking at data that people are when people are communicating, talking, reading the newspaper, doing Sudoku, and just collecting that data in real time and trying to mine that to understand what's predictive of a decline over time or a neurological dysfunction. And a lot of the people I mentioned before are also involved in that work. And the third theme that I'll show you a bit about is to detect signatures of brain disease. So these are, can we detect neural degeneration years before it actually gets diagnosed, and what are the novel technologies that we can develop that use a lot of data and signal to make these early diagnoses. And this is collaboration with folks in BME. Professor David Boas and I are PIs on a UO1 grant. That project involves Professor Summers, Cronin Golem, Terry Ellis, Rob Reinhardt, and a bunch of other folks. So just to give you a flavor of what this work looks like. So the first theme, as I said, is to identify biomarkers of brain health, disease, and recovery. Here, when we study people who've had a stroke, we spend a lot of time collecting brain images of various forms, structural scans, functional scans, resting state data, and we look at structural connection and different ways to understand what's wrong in different parts of the brain. But we've really not had the chance to build it all together into a model to then see what of that information actually predicts whether somebody's going to have trouble communicating or walking, and what predicts the recovery of those outcomes. So in this seminal paper that we worked on with Professor Betke and Ishwar, we were able to put a lot of that data, much like what Kehan was talking about, phenotype, behavioral data, as well as brain scans, into one model to see to what extent we could predict whether somebody was going to improve from the rehabilitation they received or not. And it turned out, and in that particular study, we were able to do a pretty good job of using regular machine learning models to do a classification of whether somebody was going to respond to rehabilitation or not. And there's some new folks who are now coming to Boston University, and we're doing some newer, more innovative work where the idea is to not take the brain scans that are highly processed, that essentially are based on a lot of derivative data analysis, but look at the brain scan and a raw brain scan, and to try to use deep learning models. And this is Professor Archana Venkatraman's work, to see if we can take the brain scan, identify where the stroke is, and then use machine learning models, deep learning models, to then detect voxel by voxel what information is most meaningful to then predict whether somebody's going to have a stroke, recover from a stroke, or have degenerative disease. So that's one example. In another example, we're using data science and methods to actually now predict whether behavior can tell us about whether somebody's going to improve or not. And this is data that we're getting from a for-profit company called Constant Therapy Health that I helped co-found, and I was able to bring all the data back to Boston University in an agreement with the company so we could use it to mine the data. And there's a lot of data. There's about hundreds of data points collected. But what we did in an early paper here was to show that when we actually looked at usage patterns of patients doing this digital therapy, we're able to see who's using the therapy, when, how, and whether that was actually improving their ability to recover. And that's what that graph on the left-hand side is. The more therapy you do, the better you improve. So in this project, funded actually by the DHI, Professor Ishwar Betke and myself with a student are trying to develop this into an interactive web page where a patient could then enter when they had their stroke, what they're having trouble with, and this data that's mined on the app that tells us, specific aspects of their therapy can tell precisely with a certain level of probability how much therapy they would need to do to actually improve their function. So that's sort of the first step towards precision medicine, because it takes into account who the person is, how old they are, how long they've had their stroke, and what the probability is of recovery. So that's another example. And in the last minute I want to talk about our third example, where now we're actually trying to detect novel signatures of brain disease. And this is a grant, as I said, we're working on right now. What you see on top there is a fairly cool device that we've been building for the last couple of years. On the blue dots you see are FNIRS, functional near infrared spectroscopy optodes that measure blood flow on the surface of the skull. And the black dots are EEG electrodes, so you can measure both blood flow in the brain as well as the electrical signal on the surface of the brain. And what's important is that we're collecting this data while people are wearing these eyeglasses where you can measure everything they're looking at, and it creates a heat map of who I'm looking at. I could be looking at Yannis and talking, and it sort of captures that piece. And at the same time, as people are talking, you can record the audio signal. The trick here, the data science trick here, is to align all these data into one sort of theme where you can integrate these multidimensional data. And that's what we're working on. So the bottom part here really is how we're doing this in interaction, because people, again, who have neurological disease have trouble communicating. So in this first experiment, we're asking people to watch videos and tell us what they see. And already on the right-hand side, I won't go through the details, but already we're able to find that young people have a very clear brain signal when they're watching a video and describing it, versus when they're looking at a sort of blank video, whereas people who've had a stroke don't have that difference, which is a clear indication of a brain signal that we're looking at. So that's sort of what we're doing right now. I'm happy to take questions or come back to this later.
Thank you. Any question? Excellent. Thank you, Swati. And next we have Patricia Fabian, who is a professor of environmental health in the School of Public Health.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces and new faces as well. Just to situate in kind of the research that I do, I work in the Department of Environmental Health. A lot of what we do is study social determinants of health, which is essentially where we work, live, play, worship, sleep, etc. Environmental health more specifically then is really thinking about more chemical exposures or environmental exposures. So things like PFAS, air pollution, heat, thinking about climate, floods, etc. So what I wanted to do was share 3 different studies that I've worked on that kind of integrate all this. It kind of builds on themes that we've heard before. The first one is this data set that we built for our Environmental Health Disparities Center. This was funded by NIH and EPA about 7 years ago. And the idea again is where you live matters, and can you gather information about where people live? If you know where people live, can you kind of integrate information about a lot of aspects of where they live? And so what we took is public databases, things administrative, things census data, parcel level data. We looked at remote sensing data, so that kind of was like the air pollution temperature sort of. We use GIS to derive lots of new variables, so things about access to healthcare, community health centers, pharmacies, etc. Weather data or climate data, both current and future, and kind of put it all into this big geospatial database. This is Massachusetts centered because it was an environmental health center for Massachusetts. Kevin Lane was part of our group. If you know him, he then kind of took this and has a share care project that did this on a national level. So he would be a person to talk to if you're interested in kind of linking some of these data sets more on a national scale. Some of the challenges here is that, as others have talked, is kind of that integration. I'm going to talk about geographical scale. So we had individual data, data about someone's home, their parcel, the block that they live in, the block group that that's part of, census tract, county, state, pixels if the remote sensing data is kind of on maybe 1 kilometer grid or a 30-meter grid, et cetera. So thinking about how to turn those into useful metrics was kind of a big challenge. But that database exists, and for Massachusetts is available for anybody who wants to collaborate. We used it in EPI models, so creating all different kinds of social and environmental determinants of health that we could test in epidemiology. The example there is looking at birth weight and whether green space, air pollution, temperature, material hardship was associated with changes in birth weight. We then combined that with simulated population microdata. So that was taking the public data sets and then doing our best to basically create individual subsets of population that we could then predict health outcomes for. Now in public health, it's all about interventions and kind of levers that you can move and push. So the reason you create a simulated population is you say, okay, this is the baseline birth weight of women living in Dorchester and Chelsea, which were our community partners. And this is what we would expect the birth weight profile to be of women who might give birth. And then what happens if you change noise exposure, green space exposure, air pollution exposure, and does it change differentially across different neighborhoods? So that sort of combination of having that database, creating new epi with it, linking it to simulated populations, then let us kind of do these health risk models around interventions. So that was really quick. Happy to talk about it more later. A second project is this asthma project. This is actually working with Bill Adams over at BUMC. And this is also thinking about asthma as a complex disease. How can we model it if we are, again, thinking about interventions? So squarely public health. So for this, what we did is build a system science model. So this is a discrete event simulation model that kind of follows kids and says, okay, you have 10,000 asthmatic kids. This is what happens during their day. They live in this type of house, get exposed to these different environmental stressors. And then what happens if you can change things like their pest exposure or their medication adherence or the type of housing that they live in, or if you weatherize or decarbonize the house as you implement some of these climate mitigation strategies. So to build this, what we do is we have building simulation models. So that is this huge data set of housing templates, multifamily, single family, gas furnace, electric baseboard heating. And so you can kind of create indoor air quality profiles from that. So that's sort of one big data set that we have. Health data. So this is where we linked to electronic health records, again, from the I2B2 and the clinical data warehouse that Bill described. We're able to get address level data. So then we can pull the address out in a de-identified way, link it to things like housing characteristics at a parcel level, block group, zip code, et cetera, and then push it all back into BMC to build models, epi models that use the health data or the exposure data or any data that's in the EHR, but then brings all these kind of geographical variables in. And so then obviously we used also the crash data set. As part of this project, we've used machine learning for image processing. So looking at housing, we wanted to know who opens their windows. Do you live close to a highway? Do you have a window air conditioner versus a central air conditioner? So that's sort of one thing we've done is taking Google Street View and done some image processing for new variables. We've built computable phenotypes. So that is taking information from the EHR that might be ICD codes, lab, FEV1% predicted, medication, visits, and then putting it all together to try to classify asthma severity for all the kids in our cohort. Have not used a lot of data science tools for that, but I think that's really right for using those kinds of tools. And then third example is for a paper that we did predicting environmental history. So for a subset of kids, we might have this asthma intake form that says, do you have cockroaches, mold, carpeting, et cetera. So we used machine learning tools, this ensemble algorithm of machine learning tools to use that to then predict who might have cockroach allergen, again, linked to all these different housing and neighborhood variables. And then the last project is brand new. Would love to see if anybody wants to collaborate on this. And it's the same idea, but now thinking about schools and indoor air quality. So similar, we're using this indoor air quality database that has billions of data points, basically collecting every minute information on carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide temperature, relative humidity, particulate matter. And what we want to do is study, did COVID interventions like filters and windows change environmental pollutants? And is that associated with changes in learning? Are there co-benefits like reductions in PM 2.5 and asthma visits to the nurse? And again, all these tools that I described before are sort of coming into this, machine learning for characterizing schools, linking to the electronic health records, which actually have some fuzzy data on what schools kids attend, so we can then link it to health outcomes there. And this is in collaboration with Boston Public Schools because the idea is to be community engaged and be answering questions that are actionable for school policy. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Bill.
Any advice on how to collaborate with Boston Public Schools? Like how it's been a challenge for us here.
Yeah, so. Yes, lead with humility, try to be helpful, collaborate, go to the meeting, you know, don't just focus on the discussion center. And sometimes that's important, so that's important.
All right, thank you. And would like to thank all of the speakers for their very insightful presentations. So this is a time where we can open up for questions, any questions that you have to any of the speakers, or any more general questions that you have about the Institute, about how to form an FRP, what the FRPs should prioritize versus not. There was some earlier discussion, just a little bit of my perspective. I think it would be great if with the FRP mechanisms we can fund new collaborations, things that you don't necessarily will do if you are not funded, because the things that you will do, probably you don't need the funding. You have other mechanisms to get funding. We would very much be interested in funding new collaborations, people that have not have collaborated in the past, and fund new ideas, things that are not yet ready to go and submit a proposal to an external agency, but where you need some of that preliminary work that is so important in terms of being able to go out and compete nationally to bring a grant to BU. Questions, comments?
I could ask okay. So one question might be, how does Hariri prioritize career level? So is the purpose of these these announcements to sort of promote junior folks, or to bring together maybe siloed senior folks, or how do you think about prioritizing the investigators involved in the project?
So the FRP mechanism funds medium to large teams. So we expect that as part of this team, we'll have senior investigators, and probably the senior investigators would be in a better position to lead the team because they will have many connections. And but also we hope and we expect that there will be junior investigators that will be involved as part of the team, maybe leading a sub-theme or a thrust area. We have other programs in place, including a junior faculty fellow program, where we support exclusively junior investigators, smaller amounts, but there the motivation is to get them started as soon as they join BU or after their first year or so, to help them start their group and expand their group and collaborate, a group network of collaborators. So the FRP mechanisms are for somewhat larger teams, not one or two individuals that would naturally collaborate. And we expect a mix of both senior and junior investigators to be part of the team. Any other questions? Yes.
The FRP, are those basically grants, or is it grants, papers? Can you talk a bit more about like previous FRPs with the ending product of some of this?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we have a process in place in order to support the FRPs once they get awarded. So during the year where the FRP is supported, some of the past FRPs, what they have done is they have organized a reading group involving graduate students and faculty. We ask them to organize one or two workshops during the year that bring together the team, but also bring some potentially external possible partners, or even others that have national recognition into sort of a way of spreading the word about what BU research can do to the rest of the country. And in terms of the outcomes, I think all of the above. So we're looking for scientific impact in terms of the traditional ways of disseminating the research, publications, presentations, but we're also looking for grants, for grant submissions. We realize that in a year, it's really hard to get a grant funded, but we want to see that the people that have formed the team are thinking longer term, how they are going, since they have started in that direction, how they are going to support that area of work on a longer term basis. Yes. So yes, we hope and expect to have participation from both the School of Public Health, the School of Medicine, and any department on the Charles River campus. And hopefully today is an opportunity to meet others, to think about connections that you can make and opportunities. And I'm sure that the people that have partnered with us, so Mike McLean, who is the faculty responsible for research at the School of Public Health, Andy Taylor at the School of Medicine, myself, I can sort of act as a matchmaker with people on the Charles River campus. We will be happy to help you identify others in specific areas of work that you are interested in. Yes.
I know we need 3 faculties in there in 2 campus. So in here, do we including also our dental school? I'm from dental school, so that is why.
Dental school is definitely included and very much encouraged to participate. Belinda is here and can be that connection to the dental school, and we are discussing with them for them to formally join this program, and if that happens, we may be able to offer a larger amount of money to any team that gets funded and supported. But yes, the dental school is absolutely welcome to be part of this. Other questions? Okay, so great. So maybe it's time to close the session. Would like to thank all of you for coming and participating. And as I said, keep in mind the 2 deadlines. So February, where we ask for responding to a few questions in the form of a very short pre-proposal so that we get an idea what may be coming in. And we hope to also will be able to provide some feedback and to you if you submit such a pre-proposal. And then in the March timeframe, I believe it's actually April 6 when the deadline is a full proposal, and we will be making decisions during very shortly thereafter, and the projects will be ready to start and go July 1st with the beginning of the new fiscal year. Thank you. And thank you to Ken, Robin, and Catherine for putting this together. Thank you so much.